Hi, hello everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. This is 0 hour episode Doash, which means 10 in Bengali. Uh, Today I wanted to talk to you about the Georgia runoffs. And also, I wanted to talk to you about something that came to my mind um, that I thought was interesting. And I call it the temptation of playing God. So first we'll talk about the Georgia runoffs, and then I'm gonna talk about this more esoteric thing called that I call the temptation of playing God. Uh, and for full disclosure, for the temptation of playing God part, it's not fully unscripted. So, um, but this is my script, la 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 la. Yeah, that's how it is in my head. So about the Georgia runoffs. I'm not a citizen of Georgia. I'm a citizen of Illinois. So I don't really know enough about the political climate of Georgia to be able to comment on it, except to talk about it from a very. Oh, by the way, the reason why I'm talking about the Georgia runoffs is because um, somebody was who watched and engaged and was kind enough to comment on the video about seditious conspiracy that they asked me to talk about the Georgia runoffs. And I'm not really an expert on anything. I'm no one. So, but I'll tell you how I feel about it from a federal government perspective. So as it stands now, uh, the Senate stands at 48 Democrats and 50 Republicans. And the two seats that are up in the air are the Georgia special elections that are coming up on January 5th. If you are watching this and if you live in Georgia, I implore you to register to vote if you haven't already. And uh, if you didn't vote in the election in November earlier this month, notwithstanding, please vote for January 5th. And if you are registered already, then please request an absentee ballot. And even the new registered voters, people who couldn't vote because they were below 18 but now are eligible to vote, please register and request an absentee ballot in Georgia if you're a citizen of Georgia, and follow the state Secretary of State's requirements to get your ballot so you can vote. And this is why it's important. If both candidates, Reverend Warnock and Mr. Ossoff, if they are both elected to the Senate of the United States, then the numbers in the Senate would come to a tie, which is 50-50. And in the case of a tie in any vote in the Senate, the tie-breaking vote is the president of the Senate, which is the vice president of the United States, which will be Kamala Harris. So it's very important, considering our Congress is a bicameral chamber, which means that it's two chambers, and in order for a legislation to pass Congress, it has to pass through both houses. And if even one of these seats went to the Republicans would hold a majority in the Senate, therefore stalling any legislation that is proposed by the House, that is proposed by the White House, and even when the White House and the House of Representatives are in agreement, the Senate can stall legislation, much like the Senate did during Obama's uh, tenure in office. And this has less to do with the partisan politics, and I'm not going to talk about the partisan politics part of it as consuming and as pervasive as it is, but I will talk to you about in terms of our welfare, the general welfare and safety of the people. Um, and to that end, if an act doesn't pass Congress by both houses, it cannot be signed into law. So no matter what Biden wants to do, he has to do everything with executive orders. And the thing about executive orders is that it can just be appended by the next administration. It can be taken to court by the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the federal bench will agree with the Senate because they're both partisan Republican. Unless we become less litigious and we focus really, really hard on winning these two seats, because it's important for the country to move forward. And we've seen from the past 4 years and the past 8 years before that, as long as the Senate has been under the control of Mitch McConnell, that Mitch McConnell and other Republican leaders, even John Boehner, and I forget the name of that other chicklet who was Speaker of the House for a minute there. Anyway, I forget his name. Is it Paul Ryan or something like that? Yeah, it's very important for us to move forward, and it's very important, and it all rests on Georgia. It really does. I think that I really have faith in Georgia, considering what they accomplished in the presidential election. But I would like to warn everybody about something, that because of the presidential election, there's a big chance that a huge number, much larger number of Republicans will vote and will register. So it is all that more important for Democrats to get the numbers out and get it out so the margins don't make the incumbent senators by like 100 votes or 200 votes or something that is so marginal that we will, go back down into the minutia of fraud and litigiousness. And we have to, and there's a reason why I'm saying that. And the reason why I'm saying that is we have to be, the progressives and the liberals have to be very careful in being litigious in the federal circuit, the federal jurisdiction, and we have to do so very carefully by being able to tailor our cases to the right places, tailor our causes of actions, because the federal judiciary is stacked at the moment. And, I think anything talking about, adding seats to the Supreme Court, and it's just, even now seems superfluous. Because, I mean, it's been around, it's been at 9 for quite some time. And that would be a battle that would be so ever consuming that anything worth doing for the benefit of the people wouldn't get done. So it's, we have to look at this more practically, and we have to look at this as people, whose government this is, that we have an effective government. And we have to, before we have think about all of the litigiousness and all of the judicial stacking and superfluous arguments of stacking the Supreme Court, we have to think and do the easiest thing that we can do, the quickest thing that we can do. And incidentally, and very rarely does the easiest and the quickest happen to be the right thing, but this happens to be that extremely rare instance where it is the right thing. which is to vote, which is to vote for the Democratic candidates in the Georgia runoffs. Because it is not about Republican and Democrat, despite the fact that we live in a bipartisan governmental paradigm at the moment, which I think will shift in the next 20 years, given what's happening to the Republican Party. And maybe even with the Democratic Party, with the progressives, depending on how Biden deals with the left progressive wing, which I'm a part of, by the way. I'm a Bernie supporter. I ran for a delegate candidate for Bernie in the Democrats abroad slot. And I agreed with Bernie when he said that he was suspending his campaign to support Biden. I did a talk about the elections where I said Biden had a lot of weight, a lot of baggage, and the baggage is the 47 years, and there's a lot there, but there's also a redemption in how he has moved forward in his life and acknowledged his mistakes and grown. That is far more Lincoln-like than anything that the incumbent has ever done. So to that end, I want to really talk about that, focus on that. It is extremely easy for you to make this change, to transform our country, to move forward. The next year will be a really tough time, but as we move forward, if we have Congress with a 50-50, then we can have movement in policy and in legislation that will directly affect our lives. That includes legislation to put money into the pockets of Americans who don't have money right now because of the COVID pandemic and losing employment, which, if it happens with healthcare, with COVID happening, and with access to vaccines being free of cost, to reducing student debt, these are fundamental fiscal monetary things that we go through every day. And these are the things that I think that is important for us to focus on, beyond the bluster of all the social issues that we prejudge and feel apply to us, and we vote accordingly. What I would like for you, for a moment, at least for this next month and a half, to wipe that aside and think of what will put food on your table, what will give you security of shelter, of a roof over your head, and what will cause that to happen. And the only thing that will cause that to happen is if there is movement in the Senate, which hasn't happened in the last 12 years. Remember, we live in an era when Congress has an approval rating of under 20%. That in any school from kindergarten to PhD, to an LLB, to fellowships, whatever, all the hoity-toityness, is a fail grade. Abysmally failed. Yeah. So, we have to be able, and I have, what I will say now would be speculative, but arguable, that it is because of a dysfunctional and caustic environment in the Senate caused by a stalled body politic of the Republican Party. So that's crucial to move forward is to not have that blockade, that stonewalling on the basis of ideology, on the basis of partisan power grabbing, on the basis of controlling a paradigm and maintaining power for self as opposed to doing the greater good. So that is why it's important that Mr. Ossoff and Reverend Warnock are elected to the Senate of the United States. These are not character debates about these people. This is not a party thing about Republican values and family values. None of that. It's about what's going to put food on your table, what's going to give you and your family and your loved ones the security of a roof over their heads and the comforts of what we have become accustomed to, of the internet, of electricity. These things and the healthcare that we so desperately need right now because of COVID and because of all of the other comorbidities that COVID is inciting, and all of the mental illnesses, which happens to be 1 in 5 who get COVID come out with some sort of a mental ailment. There's an avalanche coming. There's an avalanche coming. And we need to be able to be prepared to heal one another. And we have to be able to do so from a governmental standpoint. And the only way that our government can do that is by having a functional Congress. And the only way there's a functional Congress is if there is meeting of the minds in both chambers, both House of Representatives and Senate. And with a Republican majority, as we have seen in the last 12 years, it has caused very little to trickle down, as Reaganomics would put it, to the masses. Any of the good that has happened that has caused the billionaires of our country to explode in wealth to levels that we can't even comprehend. It's beyond comprehension. It's surreal. So I implore everybody, anyone who has $1 to spare, to give it to those candidates. Anybody who has time to spare, to phone bank, to go out and ask Georgians to do their duty as Georgians and as Americans, and as people who want to get fed and have a roof over their heads. That's an important point. So that's about Georgia. And now we're going to talk about God as the devil goes down to Georgia. So, when we're children, I don't know if there's a story about, my episode about stability and trauma in No One Unscripted ABCs. You can go take a look at it. It's the temptation of playing God. I was thinking about it the other day. These days, I try my best to not hurt anything. And so I was watching the spider play around. And there was a time when I would be like, oh, let me go get some ants and I'll feed the spider, And then something occurred to me, and I was watching, and I watched some of the ants around the spider web, and they were feeding on things. And there was this temptation on my part of getting something and picking up some of the ants and feeding it to, or putting it in the spider's web, and the spider coming in and getting it. There was some sort of a power paradigm at play there, that I was being sort of very darkly tempted by, because I was getting in, and this revelation came to me as I was watching this a couple of days ago, where it's that I was if I were to go and pick something, put something in front of an ant, and the ant were to get up there, and then I were to pick it up and then go over to the spider web and drop it onto the web, and then it would wiggle and it would get caught. I have just gotten in the way of that ant's direction. I played God right there when I picked that ant up, dropped it there, and did nothing as I watched the life of that ant being consumed by that spider. And for a long time, I gave myself the excuse that I was feeding the spider. But the other side of that was I was killing the ant. Yeah. So why would I want to do that? You know? And that's a fundamental question. That's a fundamental question about everything. About everything. Why do I want to control something other than myself? The temptation of playing God. Why do I want to judge somebody or an action when it's not my own? Because the temptation of playing God. Because we haven't taken the time to understand the situation well enough to not be a part of it at all. If anything, to just observe. And if anything, make sure that somebody's callous action doesn't just wipe that away. That before it's wiped away, say I have to clean that place where the spider web and there's a lot of junk, that I blow it a little. That's all it takes for them to scatter. And then I just clean it off. And the funny thing is they'll go away. And I've been doing this for months now. I'm observing. This is, that's one of the things about having social anxiety and agoraphobia. And I've had this for a decade now, as long as I've worked. And one of the reasons why I channeled my energy and my education into writing, drawing, talking now, is because I can't go out in public and really talk to many people in a coherent way. And as a child, I had a stutter and a lisp, and I worked through that. And, I went from that to speaking in front of thousands of people, speaking in courtrooms, and now talking this way on camera. And I've dealt with mental ailments, and I continue to deal with them. And I'm working through all of these things and with my limitations. And so now I've come to the very minute and almost, they are esoteric and seemingly unseen things about myself that reveal so much about everything around me and how the world is operating. So, I'll tie this point out, and I want y'all to think about this. That, that temptation of playing God, of doing something without understanding it, with the presumption that you know. Yes, you may know. You may know what it is to be gay because you know someone who is. But you don't, and you never will understand it if you aren't. Or if you haven't taken the time to put yourself in a gay man's shoes. And I'm using a gay man because I'm a gay man. Maybe 98% gay. 99? Can't be 100. I'll tell you that much. As a matter of fact. Yeah. So, but 99. Yeah. I think that somewhere that comes in not knowing how to understand. Now, knowledge, I say knowledge is power, wisdom is understanding. And knowledge, when it's unguided, is like a lightning bolt hitting somewhere, unintended, misdirected. But if knowledge is channeled and that electricity from a lightning bolt is converged onto a point, if you've ever seen lightning hit the Washington Monument, you see, like, if you watch it in slow motion, you'll see that the lightning comes out from the ground like these roots, and it forms this triangle, and there's the Washington Monument, and up from the skies comes down this sort of arrow, these spears they meet at that point, at the tip of the obelisk, and that is that is focusing your knowledge, condensing it into understanding, into wisdom. And I keep doing it because this is the crown, this is our brain, this is where we process information. We have to get ourselves out of our id brains, of our lazy brains, of our brains that are in the base of our minds and the base of our instincts, and lift ourselves up into thinking. Go back to the allegory of the cave by Plato, and think about understanding the things around us, not just knowing that they're there. Because if you just know that they're there and follow them to be, they may not be what we think they are. That sounded a little esoteric. Yeah. This whole second part of the episode is. So with that, I'd like to leave you all with that thought, right? The importance of unity of thought and mind, the importance of not of resisting the temptation of playing God. And I think that democracy, in a very funny way, voting is one of those rare instances where you find the easiest way to implement change through a very diluted democracy, a republic, which reconsolidates power of the vote in one person. So in a really poetic sense, and I'm sure the Founding Fathers and every other great leader since then thought about this in planning Washington, D.C., the Washington Monument is like the human spine, and that lightning striking is our intuition meeting the knowledge, forming an understanding, and creating a more perfect union. That's how I see America. That's how I see the promise of my Constitution and your Constitution. And that's why it's important that our Senate and our Congress move and work and is able to operate and is not stalled and stonewalled by power mongering and partisan politics, because there's something that is far bigger and greater and more powerful at work in the American democracy, in the consolidation and the reconsolidation of power, in the checks and balances of, in the separation of powers, in the dilution and in the reinstitution of power. That movement is what keeps a body politic alive. And that movement is crucial. And the only way we can get that movement is by having a Congress that works. And the only way we can do that is by electing Mr. Ossoff and Mr. Warnock to the Senate so that things can get done. I thank y'all for watching if y'all get all the way to the end, and I love you. Bye.